Hi, I'm the author Mark Morris. I'm here at the Festival of Fantastic Films, and I'm here to answer some questions, I believe. Are you good at sport? I used to be. Yeah, I used to be a pretty good footballer. I was in my school team at football. I was never as good as my dad, though, because we come from a family of footballers, and my dad was offered professional terms by West Brom and Mansfield, and he always used to say about me that I could have been as good as him, but I was never committed enough, because I was always interested in too many other things. So I used to be pretty good. What's your earliest memory? My earliest memory is actually it's a nightmare that I had when I was in my cot. So I was probably less than 2 years old, and I remember standing up in my cot and holding the bars of my cot, and on the opposite wall was the men. You know, the men at work sign with the man digging, the big sort of black silhouette of the man digging the road. It was that on the opposite wall, and he was just digging and moving just so slowly and relentlessly. And I remember it being absolutely terrifying and screaming for my parents. And it seemed to go on for ages, for like almost like hours, but I'm sure it didn't. And then I remember my mum just, coming into the room, opening the door and the light coming in and it just disappearing. So that's my earliest memory. Next question. What was your first paid job? God, have I ever had a paid job? Just trying to think. I think it was probably just a supermarket job. I think I had supermarket jobs when I was about 17 or so. And I worked at Asda. 16, I think I was. I started working at Asda when I was doing my A-levels. And I hated it because we had a really horrible manager called Mr. McCourt, who was a real bully and hated students. And I remember one time he made me stay 40 minutes late because he gave me a job to do, and it was a really difficult job, and it took ages. And because I hadn't finished it, he made me stay. And he once made me. There was up in the warehouse, on the second floor of the warehouse. He once told me to go up there and clear it out, and it was full of boxes and it was full of rubbish and stuff. And I was clearing all this stuff up, and I picked up a great big piece of cardboard that was on the floor, a big flat piece of cardboard, and held it up in front of me and started walking forward to put it against the wall. Little did I know that this cardboard was covering a big hole in the floor, and I walked straight into it. And honestly, it was about a 40-50 foot drop to the floor below, because it was another warehouse below me. And as I fell, I'd let go of the cardboard and slap my hands down either side of the hole, and then I remember looking down and just seeing this floor like 40 feet below me, and slowly pulled myself back up out of the hole and went and told him about it. I was shaking and went and told him about it, and he just laughed and said, "Well, you should have been a bit more careful, shouldn't you?" Are you a good cook? If so, what's your signature dish? Yeah, I do a lot of cooking. I do probably 80% of the cooking at home, I think. And what's my signature dish? I make a good curry. I make a good Thai chicken curry. I don't know. I make a pretty good spag bol, all those kinds of things. But I'm kind of a bit of a maverick cook as well. I just like to kind of throw things together and see how they taste. What's the scariest movie you've ever seen? I think this is kind of one of those things. It's a kind of relative thing, because I think the scariest film you've ever seen is the one that you see when you're very, very young, because you've never really seen horror films before. And I've seen so many now that they don't tend to scare me anymore. So I think the first proper horror movie I ever saw, the first proper adult horror movie, was also the scariest film I've ever seen. And it's quite a shonky old film called The Haunted House of Horror, which was made, I think, about 1969, 1970. And it's about a group of kind of bright young teenagers, although they're all played by kind of 30-year-olds, who are having a party, and one of them says, "Hey, there's a spooky old house down the road that's supposed to be haunted. Let's go and check it out." So they all go to this haunted house, and one of them ends up being horribly murdered. And then it becomes a kind of a kind of proto sort of serial killer slasher movie. But I remember at the time being absolutely traumatized by it, and even watching it now, the murder scenes are really gory. They're quite gory. And I remember afterwards, after seeing it, my mum and dad were out. I think they must have gone out, and I was sitting watching this thing. I was about 11. And I remember lying on the settee afterwards, shaking with trauma because I found it so horrifying. So yeah, I'd have to say that's probably the scariest film I've ever seen, even though I've seen it since, and it's really not that scary. Okay, so this question is, who is your favourite Doctor Who and why? And your favourite Doctor Who monster? I'm, full confession, I'm a big Doctor Who fan. I've written for the series, and I've written Doctor Who novels and audio dramas. So my favourite Doctor is and always will be, I think, Tom Baker. And he wasn't my first Doctor. My first Doctor was Patrick Troughton. I remember watching a Patrick Troughton story in black and white when I was 4 called The Abominable Snowmen. But Tom Baker became my favourite Doctor because I think he became the Doctor pretty much at the time when I became like a proper Doctor Who fan. And that was beginning of 1975, and I'd always loved watching Doctor Who because it was the first thing that scared me, and I was always drawn to scary movies and scary TV shows and ghost stories and things like that. But one day, I was January 1975. I went into town with my dad, and I went into a shop, and there was a little rack of books, like a spinning rack, and there was a Doctor Who book on there called Doctor Who and the Auton Invasion. And up to then, I never knew that Doctor Who books existed. And I bought this thing and took it home, and I'd say it was that moment that made me a Doctor Who fan. And that was, looking back, I know that was the 3rd episode of Tom Baker's first story that very day. So I became a huge Doctor Who fan from then on. So Tom Baker was my favourite Doctor. And my favourite Doctor Who monster, there's a race called the Zygons, which is Tom Baker's, we're in Tom Baker's 2nd season. And the reason I like them so much is just because they're brilliantly designed. They look like giant kind of orange fetuses with suckers all over them. And even back in 1975, they looked brilliant, and they've brought them back in the new series. And I still think the 1975 ones are better.